Hey guys, Dr. Tony here, and I just want to welcome you into my backyard. My wife and family and I live in an apartment just up the coast over here, and this is our view every morning. Now I want to jump online. Michaela's asked me to just go back into, she calls it a time warp, but to go back into time warp and just go back and talk about what was happening in my life that we sat down and really started to get really crystal clear on freedom, and in particular what my freedom number was and what were those circumstances, how did that actually come about. So just want to share that with you. You know, we need to dive back to, it didn't happen all at once. The final culmination did. It actually came out with really sitting down up till about 3 o'clock in the morning the one day and just getting really clear on what the freedom number actually was. But prior to that, you've got to dive back into, and that was about 1995, I think, when that time came about. But it was happening prior to that, really getting clear on what I really wanted life to be like. You know, because I was following a path that most people consider to be a successful path, and that was, you know, go to school, get good grades, and I'd got into medical school. In 1987 was the year I started at the University of Western Australia, which, fun enough, is just about 5 kilometres up the road over there, behind us that way, sort of over the camera. And the drive to get into medicine was that same drive to really start building an impenetrable financial wall around myself and my future family at the time. I wasn't married. I did meet my wife on orientation day of university. That was seriously one of the coolest days of my life. But prior to that, I had this drive to change the destiny of my family ever since probably about 5 years old. I sort of knew what I didn't want, and that was brought up in a country that had a civil war. At 5 years of age, we ran away from what was Rhodesia into South Africa, left everything behind. That was just massive disruption. And I won't go into detail on that, but only just to see that happen again just a few years later in the very early 80s, when we did the same thing and left South Africa and came across to Australia to build a better life. But the consequence of that was huge. It really just tore my family apart, and mostly it tore the family apart because there was financial uncertainty. We came out with virtually nothing. And there was massive financial uncertainty, and I knew that that's what I didn't want. I knew that down at a cellular level, that I wanted a better life, I wanted a different life, I wanted a different outcome for my family, and I needed to find a better way. And that's what drove my journey into study hard, really get the grades that got me to medical school. And in the process of going through that, what I started seeing was that there was an illusion of life there. There wasn't freedom. You were trapped by a high success lifestyle. You know, forget about what people think for a second about the quality of the work that doctors do. If you talk about the quality of their life with their families, it's a really different story. You know, when my wife and I got engaged in final year medical school and we got married just after we graduated. In fact, we had our marriage ceremony like 3 days before we actually had our graduation ceremony. So we hung around for a few days here in Perth before we then took off into Asia for our honeymoon. But I didn't mention my wife was studying medicine as well, and she graduated in medicine as well at the same time as me. And so we've gone out into this profession that's this, you know, the idea that it's an aspirational profession. And what we found was that we were working 140 hours a week between us. 4 nights of the week, one of us didn't get home. It was stressful. It was unbelievably stressful. And we looked ahead into the future. There was no change in that. When we looked at our peers, we looked at our colleagues that much further ahead. There was, they were working long hours. They weren't getting the time off. That's, this wasn't this dream lifestyle. They might have made a good income, but that's, there's lots of things you can do to make money, but your time, the quality of your time is such a precious thing. And I knew I wanted my freedom. And what I got clear on over serious, deep introspection around what I wanted was I started with what I didn't want. And And for me, it really started in 5th year medicine. So that was I graduated in 92, so it was 1991. I got really clear that I knew I wasn't going to practice as a doctor. And that's actually scary. You've still got a year to go for your studies, and this is this path that there's no support around you, because everybody thinks that if you're going to leave medicine, you must be a lunatic, especially when you've done all the study to date. But I wanted my freedom. I wanted to design a life where I could sit here and watch a sunset go down and have time at my control and really choose what was of highest value to me. And as I mentioned, when we graduated, I can tell you now that, I've mentioned that the university was only 5 kilometers further up the road, and we were living about 20 to 25 minutes drive away from the hospitals where my wife and I were working at the time. And we actually had to move closer to the hospitals. And the main reason that forced us to move was there were nights and mornings and evenings when we were driving home that we were so tired that we were falling asleep. So it's a good thing when you're driving, and we couldn't be sure that we'd actually reach home safely. That's how physically exhausted we were. And I started getting really clear after graduating that I didn't want this. I actually wanted my freedom, and my freedom meant I wanted my time back. And that's really what came about, the whole idea of what was my freedom number and what would come about. What was driven of this question, it wasn't about being wealthy, it wasn't about buying stuff and having elaborate stuff, it was about having my time. That was the most precious thing. That's what I craved at a deep level. I really truly wanted my time back. And what changed was, it wasn't about making money or becoming wealthy. What the question that I started asking was, what would need to happen for me to have the choice not to have to go to work? And what would need to happen for me to have the choice? And again, it wasn't about riches, it wasn't about wealth, it was about freedom. I wanted to be, my wife and I were newly married. We were going to be starting a family soon, and I wanted to be a dad. I wanted to be home to raise my kids. I wanted to be able to not to have to ask for permission to go and attend school assemblies, or take them on a holiday when we wanted, and just to have choice. And I've decided that was a serious priority in my life. And what that meant was, I just looked around, and nobody around me was doing that at the time. I couldn't draw examples from my peer network, from what was normal around me. So I needed to create a new normal. I needed to find people that their version of normal was different to that. And so I just needed one example. I just needed to see that if somebody else had done it, then perhaps I could too. If somebody else had done it. We live in Australia, and there's so many amazing free countries in the world that you can design a life of your choosing. And often the things that hold us back are the self-imposed limitations. And if we could just see that somebody else had did it, if they could do it, maybe I could too. And so I started drawing those examples. Initially it was books, and then I went to seminars, and eventually I found a mentor in my life who was able to share with me some of the steps to do it. And the clarity I got was, I needed to separate me from my time. I needed to have money coming in without needing to exchange time to do it. And so this is a bit of a fireside chat, or a sunset chat, by the way. And what that turned into was the real question that said, okay, I didn't need to replace my income. What I needed to do was to have income coming in that was above my baseline living expenses. And that's what I got clear on. I said, okay, so how much do I need to live on to be at the minimum level of the standard under which I choose to live life? And when this came about, I got really clear, and I went, well, what is the minimum standard that I'd be okay with in life? What is this minimum standard that if we had an income coming in above that, we would actually be okay if it bought us our time back? And that's what I sat down and worked out the one night. When that actually became clear, and I shared this with you, but that was like 2 years of a journey of kind of getting clear on what was the question I actually wanted to ask. And the question was, how do I buy my time back? And it was, well, what standard is the minimum that I'd be prepared to accept? And what was that number? And when we worked that out, I sat down, and then my wife and I actually worked it out. We worked out there was $70,000 a year And this was back in, it was in early 1995 we got that we actually got really clear on it. I still remember the cafe that we were sitting in to sort of start scratching that out. We didn't have money planners or any of the stuff that I give you guys now. We just had pens and paper and questions, and we're going, well, what else do we spend on, or what else would we want here, and how much would we want for this, and how much would we want for that? And then the question was, if in exchange for our freedom, what would that number be? And it came in at 70,000. Now, my wife and I were earning a lot more than that out of medicine at the time, but we only needed 70,000 to buy our time back, and that was the most precious thing for us. So when we got clear on that, it was, well, what would we need? How much income would we need coming in that we didn't have to exchange our time for us to choose to then step out of what is traditional jobs, etc., and actually buy our time back? And that was the foundation of the freedom number. And I didn't call the freedom number back then. It was just, hey, if I've got 70,000 a year coming in, we can be okay with how we choose to live at that level, and we would then be free. And then with the clarity of that, I could see the end in mind. I could actually then picture that. And I actually remember I wrote that down on a little 3x5 card. I laminated it. I put some little gold pictures next to it. Because then the question became, well, how? How do we do that? But it starts with what? What is it you're trying to design? How do you want to design your life? And then we jumped into the future, and we said, what would life look like if we had that created? Not in the future. We imagine ourselves in there in the moment. Because for me, that was, it made it real. It made it, the mind can't, to me, the mind can't separate what's fiction and what's fantasy and what's reality. What's fiction and fantasy is the same thing. But what's fiction and what's reality? And if it can see it, if it can visualize it, it can start figuring it out and ask those questions. And that's what we did. And I looked at it every morning and every night, every morning and every night. It was, okay, if I can get that 70,000 coming in, how would we do it? Okay, and then by looking at it and saying, okay, we've done this, now how did we do it? We've done this, now how did we do it? So we tricked our mind into saying, this is achievable. We've already done it. Now, let's just go and discover the path we actually did to do it. And that was just, I forget where I learned that the first time. It might have been one of the first books I read, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. Got to go back and try to remember where that actually came from. I think it was from there, but we visualized like we already had it. And so we tried to visualize it with the detail that we needed, the detail like we were already there, like we could visualize what life was like when we could wake up in the morning when we chose. We could take time off when we chose. We could take on projects that we chose. We could take time off when we chose. We could go out to lunches together. We could pick our kids up, take them home, all that stuff. And we liked that view. That vision was like, we went, wow, this is worth figuring out how to do this. And it's worth putting all our energy into figuring out how to do it, not tricking ourselves and say, well, maybe I can't. Because if somebody's done it, then surely you can. And so that was, going back and remembering it, we spent a real lot of time trying to get real crystal clear on what that looked like. And that's what it came back to. It was like at 70,000 a year, we had the basics of the life that we wanted. And then it was just a case of, well, how did we do it? And that drove everything. That drove all of our decisions. It drove the study I undertook. It drove the mentors I sought. It drove the courses I took. It took life down different paths, but man, it became an adventure. And every decision was around buying our time back. And, I did it with such a focus that I was able to do it before I turned 27. I was able to step out of medicine and create that freedom. And, when we first got our freedom number, it wasn't as much as I was earning out of medicine. But we were free. And, so that's now 21 years ago. And I would never replace that for any job or any amount of money in the world. That having that choice of, my younger son has just graduated from high school, goes into college next year. Older son's graduated, and we've been there almost every step of the way, Out of choice, we've had the chance that our kids know who their parents are. And it's not about waiting for some future date. It's about intentionally designing the life you want today. So I just want to get on and share that with you. As I said, that hopefully that that's just sunset chat. sharing what it was like in the beginning. And by the way, just the other thing is I had to keep that a little close to my chest, because I made the mistake of sharing those goals with a few well-meaning friends around me, and I had no support. Family thought I was nuts. My wife is Chinese by background, and I'm sure the only reason her parents let me go out with her was because I was studying medicine. That was a good thing, but then I was Caucasian, not such a good thing. Yeah, the support I had, if I had to rely on well-meaning family and friends to give me the support I needed, it was sorely lacking. So if you find yourself in that circumstance, know that that's just normal. But when you push, when you have a white heat focus and you have a clarity of your destination and you just keep stepping forward, it is 2 steps forward. So it's not 1 step back, it's probably 1.9 steps back half the time. But when you're stepping forward and you keep the clarity of that focus and action will dissolve doubt and worry. Doubt and worry can only exist in an idle mind. You know, when you've got that clarity of what that outcome looks like, and you go, what's my next step? What's my next step? And just keep stepping, step by step, you get closer. Because what you'll find is, and trust me on this, take this into a deep place and hold this in those places when you've got that doubt. But there are people at that next level above who've created that out of their life, who are standing there with their hands out, just waiting for you to grab them. And if you can just cast your eyes not down at below, but forward and looking up, you'll see that. You'll see there's people around you that they might not be around you to start with. You might need to seek them out. And by being a part of this community we've created, we're trying to make it easy. We're trying to make it that you can immerse yourself in that new normal. But there are people at the next level. Even for us now, the next level of what we're creating, the movement we're creating, and the new normal we're creating, there's people that are far further above in versions of what they've created that are there with their hands out. And sometimes you don't see them, but often you don't see them just because you're looking down. You kind of got to look up and just know that there's a next level. And if somebody's done it, you can too. Hope that's of value. As I say, I've got to drive back or really dig back to 1995. We actually made that decision. March 1995. I made that clear decision that was a goal worth going for. That was a goal to move heaven and earth, to create, and we did. And I know so many examples now. We're not isolated cases by any stretch of the imagination. There are tens, hundreds, millions of people around the world that are living lives of their design. And if you can get around them and you can model them, you can create it too. Don't ask for it to be easy. It won't. It'll challenge you. It'll challenge your beliefs. But it's worth it. If you want a better life for you and for your kids, you can actually change it. You can truly change whatever the past has been. You can change it and move it up to another level. So that's a little bit of my share. Hope you've enjoyed the chat. Hope you've enjoyed a bit of the sunset on a beautiful Perth, Western Australia summer day as it goes into evening. I'm now going to wander back and take a wander down to the shops with my beautiful wife, and then go grab some dinner. So, love you all. I'll talk to you again soon.